Okay, so now we're going to be combining a couple different methods to extract some information from you. So the first one I'm going to be using is the Socratic method of questioning. And we're going to be using this method while we're trying to find out the cause and effect of an event in history. So we are going to start with the First Continental Congress in the middle of the board. So I will be able to draft this out so we can read from left to right what were the events that happened and why they happened. First Continental Congress. Okay, so let's start with the causes first. So what was the cause of the Continental Congress?
The Quartering Act?
The Quartering Act. What was the Quartering Act?
It permitted the governors to house soldiers in private houses or buildings.
Yeah, and why would that make them mad? The colonies mad? Would it make them mad because they really wanted these British soldiers in their houses?
Yeah. It's an invasion of privacy.
It's an invasion of privacy, and did they have any say in what was going on?
Not even.
Not even a little bit. So they were angry because the king, the crown, made them house people that were pretty much invading their land, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they were housing people. Okay. What's another one?
The Coercive Act?
Coercive Act. How do you spell coercive?
Coercive.
Okay. And what was the Coercive Act?
It was also called the Intolerable Act.
Who called it the Intolerable Act?
The colonies.
The colonies called it the Intolerable Act. So it was kind of like a slap in the face to call it the Intolerable Act. Okay, and what was it?
It closed the port of Boston till the cost of tea and custom charges were repaid.
Okay, and why would they want to close the port of Boston? What happened there?
The Boston Tea Party.
Boston Tea Party. Oh, you're on it. So they closed Boston. They closed ports. And what was the problem with closing ports? Why would that really make the colonists mad?
You can't move things in and out.
They can't get imports, and they can't make money, and they can't do anything. So it lowered their income. Okay, and like you said, it closed ports. So we'll say that the Tea Party was a cause of the Quartering Act. Okay. And what was the Tea Party? It's where people overthrew. They threw tea into the sea. Why did they do that?
Because of taxes.
Because of taxes. Actually, not really because of taxes. It was a monopoly. The government tried to monopolize the tea industry, so they allowed the East India Tea Company or East India Trading Company to monopolize the tea industry. So they had no money. So the black market couldn't get it, and they were only allowed to buy from one person. Now, did they have any say in that? Okay. They didn't have any say in it. So it was without representation. They were forced against their will. Okay. Okay, so that's pretty good with the causes. So we can say that monopoly of industry by the crown caused the Tea Party, which they threw tea into the sea, which made the crown develop the Coercive Act, which closed the ports and lowered the income. After doing this, they had soldiers in houses, which was called the Quartering Act, which housed people. After all this went on, it made the colonies angry enough to get together and do the First Continental Congress, have the First Continental Congress. So what exactly was the First Continental Congress? Was this the point where they're like,
We want our own laws?
we want our own laws, we don't want anything to do with England? Or was this kind of a, we should have a little bit more representation, but we don't really want to break? What actually were they saying? Bottom.
They didn't want to break away completely.
They didn't want to break away completely. Why? Did they not want to break away completely because they still really liked the crown, or they depended on them, or protection? I mean, you got to remember they were just out of the 7-Year War. Let's pretend like we just learned this in the last minute. And the 7-Year War was against the Native Americans. coming across the Appalachian Range to fight the colonies. And the British came in for 7 years and defended their colonies. So were they... P-L-E-T-E-O-I, completely. Were they doing it because they didn't want... They still really liked being British? Or because they wanted to keep them as allies? Allies? Because why?
They were afraid of the Native Americans.
They were afraid of the Native Americans. They wanted the protection. Okay, so that's kind of why they wanted to do this. So what was the outcome? What was the effect of the First Continental Congress? What happened? Was the British like, oh, this is great, no problem, you guys are on your own, have a good time?
I would say no.
No, they were pretty angry about it, actually. They were angry that they would want to break free. So they, the colonies kept trying to push the crown to do things, and the crown kept pushing back. So it was a tug of war back and forth. Who was going to win? So the colonies, to defend themselves, came up with certain laws and actions. And they were able to band together as a united group. That's why we're called the United States. But they were able to band together as a united group and come up with certain ideas. So what were some of the ideas they came up with?
The Constitutional Convention?
Yes, the Constitutional Convention was one effect of the First Continental Congress. What was the Constitutional Convention?
It was to help revise the Articles of the Confederation.
Okay, so in the First Continental Congress, they had the Articles of the Confederation. And in the First Continental Congress, they pretty much said we should be able to do our own thing. Each state should have their own laws. Everybody should be able to do their own, say for what they want. But what happens if Ed is a bootlegger in Virginia and he goes to New York? Do the laws still match? No, they're different. So the Constitutional Convention, they were able to amend some of the articles to make it more of a federal government. So this is where the federal government actually comes into play, the American federal government. Okay? And they were able to amend some constitutions here, right? So they changed it, and some of their changes, they made the Congress, right? So they made the Senate and the House. So some of the states had problems with this, the bigger states versus the smaller states. The Virginia Plan was one of them. What was the Virginia Plan?
Empowered to make laws and levy taxes with representation in both houses based on population.
They wanted to do everything based on population. How would this work out for Massachusetts?
Not so well.
Not so well. Virginia's a big state. So they wanted to do based on population. What was another one they came up with?
New Jersey Plan.
The New Jersey Plan. And what was that?
They kept the one-house legislature of the Confederation Congress, but expanded its powers to include raising revenue and regulating commerce.
Yes. They wanted to have one house do a lot. They wanted to have one house that was an elected house, and it wasn't based on population. Elected house. What was the compromise between these two?
Great Compromise.
The Great Compromise, yes. And what was the Great Compromise? What did it come out with?
They rejected the New Jersey Plan.
Yeah, because who really wants one electoral house? What does that look like?
Pretty grim.
No, it looks, yeah, it does look pretty grim, but didn't they just leave that?
Right.
Isn't that kind of like a monopoly?
It's where they came from.
Where they came from. It kind of is like having a king. Tell everybody what to do without anyone saying anything. Because the president in this one elected house would have been not elected by the people, but it would have been chosen by the people in the house. Okay? So it's not really a good representation, which is what they're trying to avoid. So what does the Great Compromise say?
They base the representation off of population.
And it's a modern day system. We're working. The Great Compromise made the modern day system.
Made the House and the
Made the House and the Senate. And what do we have in the House?
representatives of population.
A population, yes. And what do we have in the Senate?
2 representations for each state.
For every state, no matter the population. And does either one have more power than the other?
No.
Can either one function without the other?
No.
So, through this cause and effect model, we can see the way the colonies were thinking, that they had a monopoly of industry that caused them to have a Tea Party protest, which caused the Crown to develop these acts that caused the colonies to be mad enough to come up with a new theory. This new theory didn't really work out so well. So the effect of a not so good theory comes better ideas. The Constitutional Convention, which is an amendment, and it was able to ratify some of the problems, and then they came up with these plans. And through a cause and effect, it didn't work out so well. So they came up with a great compromise, which is the same way our government is running today.